Hi, team. Welcome to 10 Talks. Mark and I are here to catch you up on everything about sports and really the athlete identity, what it's like to transition, why is it so difficult? And even if you're not an athlete, I think you will find this interesting as we just talk about what does it mean when an injury happens or we actually transition out of something that we love. For us, it's sport. For you, it may be a career. What's really important is that this matters to us. It matters to our identity. It's who we've been. It's how we've identified. It's a lot of our purpose. It just has a lot wrapped in it. And so, Mark, thank you so much for really giving us the doctor side of it. What's
Yeah.
happening really inside of the science? And I want to start with athlete identity, or even, from a high performance perspective, those that have been in a great career. What's going on physiologically and mentally inside that athlete identity?
That's a great question. So again, thanks for having me today. As far as when you're a high performing athlete, you've been through the trenches, and to get to where you are now, you put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and it's really been taken over most of your life, especially from a young age. And so, a lot of times, especially at the elite level, folks tend to have a lot of the other stuff fade back into the background, and they really only view themselves as the person that's out on the field, and that there's a big struggle between who am I,
Mhm.
yet the on and off the field persona. A lot of what we're going to talk about today is separating that and making sure we're very mindful of that we're not just an athlete or high performer or whatever, because once that athletic career does end, because it will end at some point, and it is finite, we're then going to have to figure out how to reintegrate into the world and have another sense of purpose, which is really important to think about the entire way.
Well, and Mark, what's so valuable about it is just how vulnerable this feels when we feel very strong inside our strength of what we're doing. And certainly from a sports perspective, our bodies give out, and we're not able to perform at the level that we've been doing it. Injury can happen, it can take us out very quickly. So there's no transition, there's no preparation for it. And certainly when injury happens, not only are we working from an identity management, where we can be depressed physiologically, we're not working out, we're not hanging out with our team, we're not belonging, we can feel isolated, we can also have the fear of being left behind in terms of somebody else taking our spot.
Yeah, all of the above.
Mhm.
So when an athlete is reaching the end of the career, from a choice. So the big thing here is to think about an end of a career, it being on purpose or your desire or choice, and then one that's happening that's not by choice, be it injury, you're being cut, being traded, or whatever. Those is two very separate bears. Because if it's a volitional choice to end, it tends to go a lot easier, and you tend to it's a very mindful process. That there's been some planning involved, where you have gotten that social safety net. You have started to think about what your transferable skills are and what you could do in the future. When things just end abruptly, whew, that can be a lot to take in. And about 20% of athletes tend to struggle or have psychological distress when their career ends, which I'd like to see that number drop precipitously, especially from doing things like this, so that athletes are prepared that, you know, they had the skills, they got to the elite level, but because it is a finite thing, they have to then think of the bigger picture, because unfortunately bad things do happen sometimes, and we have to prepare for that.
So let's just talk about how do we prepare. You mentioned that psychological safety and also that family safety, the purpose. You've mentioned a couple things. Before we go into the details of it, I want to inquire just about social media, because so much of our identity can be attached to what we're posting about, how many likes we're getting. And certainly when we have been very popular or getting a lot of attention from our performance, and we're not going to be doing that anymore, either by choice or by injury or by being cut. What's happening?
So I'm really glad you brought this up now, especially with NIL, so name, image, likeness being such on the forefront, even for our younger athletes, where they do have a social media following. I don't know of many athletes these days that they are able to get to this point without having that draw. And there's a monetary aspect to it. There's a fame aspect to it, and a lot of people are actually thinking of their own self-worth based on all those likes, which is an endorphin hit every time that you see it, and it can be a bit addictive. The problem with all of this is you have to really, again, separate who you actually are from the, are you a blend? Are you the person that's on the field? Is that all of you? Or who are you off the field? There are a couple of great resources. And so you're talking about the online aspect. One is the athlete transition study that was developed several years ago by a collection of docs who now are actually involved with the International Olympic Committee's working group, or mental health working group. But they're polling a lot of players who are transitioning out of sport and following them over time to figure out how best to support them. But the best part of the website, aside from just the actual research that's occurring, are the resources. On this, it hits every single aspect of what someone could expect to face from family relationships and wanting to maybe work with a therapist, from a financial perspective and working with a financial counselor, to substance use counseling. I mean, all the things that could potentially come up, there are links to click, and we'll make sure that we share that. Another fabulous resource from our Aussie partners is crossingthelinessport.com. They basically have done the same thing in a parallel fashion. They actually have a bunch of worksheets and things that you can look at for really tools, and we can go over some of what they provide as far as how to help the athletes when they are transitioning into sport.
So Mark, that's great. And I know we do a lot of work too in terms of just really getting the athlete well-rounded, understanding that their brand is very much about not just who they are on the field, but who they want to be and who they want to stand for. And again, into our three-dimensional model of that personal, professional, and philanthropic. And as we talk about how to really understand who we are away from performance, being able to have a philanthropic component and play a small role in something bigger than ourselves. Who can we give hope to? Who can we really attach to, that it isn't all about me? And as much as an athlete is inside their sport thinking all about them, what does it do when they actually branch out and start to inquire about, philanthropic or getting involved volunteering, however we want to just introduce starting to develop as a whole person?
Well, whether they like it or not, athletes are on the stage and they are looked up to, especially by our youth. And so what their actions are after sport, people are paying attention to, and also while they're performing. So I love the idea of folks volunteering and staying in that kind of collegiality part of sport, because it's their interest. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of who they are in that identity, but it's just a shift of how they're using it. And so they still get to stay involved. I mean, the idea of becoming a ref or a coach, or just volunteering to show up to the youth soccer fields and pass out drinks or whatever. I mean, like, just staying involved is super important. The other ways, and it's a very popular thing, especially for the top elite athletes who kind of are already pretty savvy with media, is actually going into media, being a talking head on the radio or TV or whatever. But you don't have to do that. I mean, you can do it on a much lower level as well. You could go volunteer for your local high school, or maybe where your own kids are, and be a presence in the community that way, or raise money for youth sports, which I think is a fabulous way to give back, because you already have the stage, might as well use it to your advantage.
Well, and that's the gift of really using our platform for social good. I mean, we've been given this gift of sports, and so it's certainly taken over our life, and it's given us a life. And so now what do we do when we start to somewhat separate from that life? And so I want to talk about really the negative side of it. We know the positive. We just talked about being able to get involved and do good with it. What happens when I'm really struggling just to get out of bed and wondering, who the heck am I without my sport?
Well, one of the first things that a person needs to do is they need to kind of make peace with their achievements. I mean, they made it to the top level, or likely if they're an elite athlete, but there's always going to be a sense of I could have done more. And so making sure that, especially when a career ends abruptly and they didn't have the opportunity to, they kind of need to make peace that, hey, we got there. This is not, yes, didn't happen. That being said, I still accomplished a lot. That's pretty cool.
Mhm.
So that does not happen overnight. That is something that has to be worked on, and staying connected, or actually maybe even working with a coach or a
Mhm.
counselor to get through that would be helpful. As far as the not being able to get out of bed, you do need to screen folks that are transitioning out of sport for depressive symptoms, and if they are developing some of those biological symptoms of depression that we talked about before, then it would be really good to get them a referral to seek some professional help, because it is treatable. It's very, very treatable. It's also super common, as I was saying. 20% of the time, this happens.
Yeah. And also just being able to fit into your family system,
Mhm.
because you've really been the one that everybody's been around, in terms of it was all about your games and your schedule and you sleeping and you eating, and it was centered around you. And now you're coming in and integrating into somewhat just being on the family team versus being the star. What happens then?
Yeah, it's figuring out where you are in the family, because a lot of times you might have been on the road. Uh, it, Focus on family is super important, because they're your core. Blood's thicker than water, and so you have to recognize that, whether you're a mother or father, or brother, sister, aunt, uncle, these people do look up to you, but they're your unit. So that is definitely, like, basically the number one thing to start to focus on, as far as how you integrate and stay on a good schedule, and really maybe shine more of the light on the other folks, especially the kids, to make sure that they're getting the enrichment that they need. One of the things that probably would be a really good idea for an athlete to do would be to keep a journal, and to write down a lot of the accomplishments they've had, both in and out of sport, and just as a reminder, one of who they are, what they've achieved, but that's not just all them. And so by doing that, by actually writing it down and figuring out what some of their other interests are, it'll be a lot easier for them to integrate into society outside of sport, because they'll be able to know, oh yeah, I did have that interest. Because a lot of them will think that that's all that there is. But by keeping the journal, not only does it help with the current part, but also with the past, because you can reflect on all the stuff that you've accomplished and be a reminder. It's a nice confidence booster.
So what's really interesting is, again, athletes are being cheered on for basically showing up to their job, right? They show up and there's bands and crowds and media, and everybody wants to know, how did you do? What's happening? I mean, everything's around who's winning, how would the game go? And then when it's not, it's really interesting to find really that endorphin hit, because we're accustomed to getting hits almost just by showing up for our career. And there's not going to be a lot of other careers that cheer for you as soon as you show up, or, really it is a big change. And as much as we want to find the next, I do want to address the realness of finding something that is somewhat like what you've gotten accustomed to.
So that is so true, and that's also why a lot of times athletes will end up dabbling into some maladaptive behaviors that do kind of fulfill that vacuum
Mhm.
of that endorphin high. So substance abuse and gambling tend to really occur in higher rates, especially in retired athletes, because they're again searching for that same feeling that
Mhm.
they used to get on the field, which is nothing's going to reach it. So they do have to sort of come up with healthier ways
Mhm.
to deal with it. But and we'll talk about substance abuse at a future time. But I will say that unfortunately it is quite addictive, in that they are trying to reach that old high.
Well, and Mark, I really value you bringing just the truth of that addiction of the career that we're in. There's a lot of workaholics. That's an addiction
Mhm.
as well. Just off the field, you're still getting that sense of belonging and accomplishment and control, that you're really being able to control that you're getting that hit. What happens when you're not able to do that? And we've got some perfectionist inside of high performance, and it really starts to reveal some not so fabulous qualities that we've been able to channel into sport and have them be good.
Yeah, that loss of control that you mentioned, and we've talked about even in the eating disorder space, it can be incredibly disruptive because you are looking for ways in which you can find control in your life, and unfortunately, there are a lot of negative things that people can dabble in: disordered eating, substance abuse, gambling, you name it. Um, a lot of times you can see a lot of irritability, and that's where the mood symptoms can come up, which is why it's so important to screen for mental health concerns. So if someone is appearing, more isolated or grumpy or irritable or just not as present, whether they're physically there or not, if they seem vacant, if they end up getting another job and they're being absent or late or whatever, or if they decide to go back to school, which is a very good idea, to go back and work that other, muscle of yours, that brain. But if then their academic performance is suffering, these are things to be watching out for. I do think, though, the academic aspect and going back to school, especially a lot of these athletes that'll go to the pros at an early age, either from directly from high school or a one and done from college, and they may have made a promise to their family that they were going to go back and get their diploma, and follow through with that because it will open door. One, you'll have a college diploma. There's a sense of purpose and mastery and look more attractive to folks that are hiring for jobs, despite the fact that you did reach a peak at another part of your life. It would be a great idea. There's a wonderful story of former all pro tight end Julius Thomas, who played with several teams, Broncos most notably. He's gone back and he's gotten his PhD in psychology and he's becoming a therapist. So and to help other athletes just like himself. So there's ways that you can translate kind of your experience into helping others, which so nicely ties back into the keeping idea of community, what your role is in society. Leaving sport, yes, it is a part of you, but you can give back.
Well, and Mark, moving into that second dimension, again, we've talked about the philanthropic dimension. Now let's talk about next careers, because
Mhm.
I know for our work as sports life coaches, we want retired athletes and retired coaches. We want us to be their next, because who better to serve and support athletes or coaches than those who have been them? So again, finding careers such as ours, or a counselor or a psych, something that you can actually train as intentionally with your brain as you have with your body and really bring this merger together. I find that just so powerful that so many times athletes think, well, as soon as I'm off the field, I'm of no value. And let's talk about transferable skills, because I just think there's so much that we have to offer that until we start to own them as intentionally as we own our sport career, we're not valuing them.
Well, I was watching a great show last night, the Big Door Prize. It's on Apple TV. It's a great quote talking about that. It was actually a priest who was talking to one of the main characters, and they're having a back and forth, and the priest goes, "Does a good book have only one chapter, or just two chapters, or is there potentially more?" Basically leading that what you've accomplished so far, that's not necessarily it, and your life can have many chapters and layers. So especially for an athlete, okay, so that time's over, what's next? What can we do? So transferable skills, what got you there in the first place? Likely you had a great focus on nutrition and healthy, you were in tune with your body, so you're going to the gym, you had really good time management and being able to stay on a schedule. So what can you use those things for? I mean, you can be a coach of someone who can focus on nutrition. You could go back and get a nutrition certificate. You can use those time management skills and be an excellent leader for an organization. I mean, there's definitely some stories, some athletes who can use their salesmanship because they were so good on the field to get with rallying the troops, if you will. I mean, Roger Staubach was a heck of a real estate guy after his career ended. And again, thinking about what got them there in the first place, the deal is you don't necessarily have to figure it out yourself. Ask your friends, ask your family, what are you good at? They'll tell you. Oh, they will tell you. They'll also tell you what you're not good at. And if you're pursuing something that is not going to get anywhere, just please listen to them. So open ears.
Well, again, I love that support team, the power of your support team, really surrounding yourself with friends and family and people that care about you, and you starting to care about them. You've been somewhat preoccupied and they've been on your support team for a long time. Now it's a chance to start to use the muscles of how do you want to support them. And now you can learn something new that you really haven't been able to focus on because you have had to be so intentional with it. As we talk about just next, I love, love, love the hope of writing the next chapter. What's next? What am I excited about? What does get me excited? Watching our film, kind of looking back and being like, what did I love about getting into sport? What did I not love and I never want to do again? Or what matters so much to me? And just as we wrap this up, I want to touch on grief, because I think grief is a very powerful tool as we move through from loss to next, because we have to acknowledge that we are letting go of something that has been in our life for a very long time. And grief doesn't have to be death. It's just a matter of it being about loss. And what have you found as some winning strategies to go through grief and really honor and manage it?
Well, the thing with grief is you do have to sit with it. You can't fight it. It is a natural thing that occurs when something comes to an end, be it a relationship, a job, what have you. So being very mindful of that it is normal, that it's okay, that it takes its own timeline. But in order to do that, you got to be able to talk through it or process it. So the metaphor of carrying around a backpack of your stressors and grief, and if it's super heavy and you're not like getting it out, it's really hard to walk through life. So talking through it, and you be it your friend, family member, trusted counselor, whomever, that'll make the backpack lighter, be a lot easier, and then you can fill the backpack with positive strategies and tools, which would be what you can work on. So it's the stuff we talked about before, making sure that you're staying on a good schedule, healthy sleep, healthy nutrition, getting some exercise, especially as an athlete, as you'd already mentioned it, but exercise was such a core aspect of their job.
Right.
Also, it's very healthy from a mental health perspective. So you should still do it once you're out of sport. So focusing on that and staying on a good schedule. I mean, I've actually noticed that some of these athletes, especially like offensive linemen, will get in better shape after they finished their career. But yeah, as far as grief goes, you have to talk through it. And if it is becoming pathological grief, meaning that it's still sticking with you and you can't, it's more of like looking like depression, and you're really stuck in a fog, making sure that then you've connected and got some professional help.
Mm. And so what's so important about just that, when I think about sport and that physical activity, this is a new chapter to find another sport that you love. Probably as a young kid, you loved 3 or 4 sports, and then you started to specialize. And again, looking at the bright side of things, this is a fun time to pick up pickleball or try
I
tennis
literally was
or
about to say
golf.
that.
Yeah, I mean, pickleball seems to be the sport right now for everyone. And most importantly, just remember to have that fun and that passion, because it's so important to take all the pressure off of us, which may have been part of the reason that we retired or chose to end our career. And so what a gift to ourselves to give us back just that passion of loving sport, loving the physical activity. Think about, journal what you love, and really be able to write the next chapter anchored in all of those amazing things.
I completely agree. I think there's such a good reason why golf has become very popular, especially for a lot of the retired athletes. Tony Romo, Steph Curry. These folks will go out there and actually become really good. But it's a mindful sport. You're out in nature. Pickleball's become extremely popular because it's not nearly as hard on your body. Although I still think it's kind of hard on your knees with the fast movements. But I mean, when you see guys like McEnroe and Andy Roddick and folks playing on national television and in these exhibition matches, they're just having fun.
Right.
But it's an outgrowth of obviously their tennis careers. But it's staying active, and it could be recreational, but again, fun. Fun and exercise are a really wonderful combo, especially for folks that have exited an athletic career.
Well, team, you've heard it. It's all about finding your next, enjoying every moment of it instead of the pressure of, I've got to win this and I've got to get it right. give yourself a break. This is a chance for you to really be a rookie again. And what a gift to start over, have some fun, and reinvent yourself. I mean, that's the joy of it. Know that you have an amazing support team. We are here to coach you through it. Mark is here in terms of if you need some more psychological help, and power of team for winning your next. So thank you, Mark. Really look forward to our next conversation, which is going to be all about substance abuse.
Thank you again for having me. Appreciate it.